Good morning again from a nice sunny day here in Ireland, and this is Francis from McCaffrey's Crafts, and I'm continuing in my series about faction fighting and Blackthorn stick fighting. And today I thought I'd kind of just go into what is like a faction fight, and if there was any kind of definitions of the time or anything that was written down in relation to describing what a faction fight is. And I have some notes here beside me. But simply, look, how would you describe a faction fight? In essence, basically, a faction fight is a test of strength, a trial of strength between like two families or groups of people or namesakes or parishes or two areas that were kind of close to each other in Ireland. The cause of the fight, I can go into another video regarding like the motives. Actually, I'll do that next time. But yeah, like there were families, and once the fight started, strangers would join in, people from the locality would join in, and it kind of gathered momentum from this. So essentially, again, they're just kind of started off as maybe disputes between two families, or something was said, or you looked at me the wrong way, or it's a multitude of kind of reasons as well. But one of the earliest definitions that I can find here in one of the many books that I have is let me see here from my notes. And the Select Committee and the House of Lords, which sat from the 18th of May to the 23rd of June in 1834. So 1834 is one of the earliest definitions that I can kind of find here throughout a number of these history books. And basically then they would say that, let me see. So the Inspector Constabulary for Leinster said that a faction fight was a number of men assembled under a leader merely for the diversion of fighting. Okay, factions were organized and led by strong independent farmers, some of whom could bring as many as 1,000 fighting men into battle. So this is kind of like one of the earliest types of definitions that you'll see about faction Ireland. And remember at the time as well that Ireland was under British rule, and Dublin Castle would be kind of like the center of where the British imperialists who were in Ireland at the time. Took us a while more to get them all out. Okay, so if you remember as well, okay, so going back there, the British were in Ireland, and initially they actually approved and condoned of faction fighting. They didn't mind it. They're like, all right, the Irish are fighting each other, bunch of farmers are beating the crap out of each other with sticks and smacking each other's heads. So that's a good thing. At least they're not trying to organize and trying to rebel against the Brits, and trying to cause problems within the country. So initially they were okay with it, but like most things in Ireland, they got out of hand. It's like two lads start fighting, then three, then four, then five jumped in, then it becomes a tradition, then a father does it, then the next generation of sons do it, then it becomes the parish involved, the whole town's involved, the next county's involved. And just like most fights, have you ever started a play fight with one of your brothers? So you start off pushing you, and it's all fun and games, but there's always one guy that gets carried away and gets a bit too much. So initially the British were okay with it, but then by the mid 1830s, that's when they were like, all right, perhaps we need to look at this and see if this is going to be a problem for us or not. So that was kind of like the main time that they could have done it. Now, regarding the faction sticks, like what they were made of, like traditionally the sticks were always blackthorn, because blackthorn was heavier and denser and a bit more flexible for fighting. They'd also use like holly sticks as well, and holly is really hard kind of wood, good for kind of cudgels more than kind of the longer sticks. Like blackthorn, you can make the long sticks, the short sticks, the little short ones. You can make a number of different weapons out of the blackthorn. They also had what was called a loading butt, And this was a whip handle loaded with lead at the thick end. So it was like, you know, they used to whip it around. And again, anything they could get off the land. They would look around the ditches, look around anything that they could use as a weapon. They would. And I said before in the last video, even if a guy got his hand on a gun at one time, which would be rare, they'd bring it to it as well. So again, like another important thing to note about stick fighting, which we can get into, is that you know, there are actually schools of instruction in stick fighting, and the art of stick fighting was actually taught by masters or trainers. Like there's a report of a school, a fencing school that used to help or train stick fighters in Dingle in County Kerry, that I can kind of go into as well when we're discussing more about Kerry stick fighting. So yeah, so in almost every faction there were men who were highly skilled in the art of stick work, and mostly fencing. They like, it came from a kind of more of a fencing background, but more often than not, there was no place for this technique when a mass of people are gathering and fighting desperately at close quarters. Like, a lot of stick fighting is, you know, at a distance, and fencing, you know, they have their rules. They jump in, they jump out, they strike. You know, there's a certain art to it and rules. But remember, in a faction fight, it's close quarters. You'll have few hundred, few thousand people all running each other with sticks. So there's not the room to engage in a very kind of, you know, prim and proper type of stick fighting. But people were trained in it. It's not to say that select battles didn't go on with it as well. So it's a combination between, there were schools, there is evidence that there were schools in stick fighting, mainly from a kind of like fencing type of background, that were connected to the faction fights. But given the close quarter nature of a faction fight, you know, it began, you know, become quite disorganized, you know, as you would kind of go into your various fights. So again, like, that kind of just gives you a kind of rough introduction as well of what like a faction fight is. And tomorrow or the next day, I'll go into more about the motives. Okay.